at the end of the day, though, with this team, it is going to come down to what version of LeBron James are they going to get over the course of the year? What version of Anthony Davis are they going to get over the course of the year? And, um, I said it on the show last night on the lowdown, and it sounds a lot more uh, ridiculous, not ridiculous, but it sounds a lot louder than it really should. But I said that, like, I don't think LeBron can be the best player on a championship team anymore. He's 39 years old, right? And I think this is really going to be the year. This really, like, I like, if you think of it like a relay race, right? Where, the guy who's getting the person who's getting the baton has to start running, and you have that baton pass that happens at speed, and I've just kind of joked that with this, LeBron has been like had to run an extra 400 meters to get to the baton to AD, who I think, though, like, when you look at the stuff that he's saying coming into this year, him like being confident enough to say, yeah, I heard the stuff that the Nuggets were saying about us. Yeah, I want to respond to that on the court. You combine that with the way that he looks, where I think he looks a lot trimmer, and I think he looks a lot more explosive and stuff. Um, I think those things, and then the way that he's shooting the ball, and how confident he looks there, and how much more consistent the release looks all the way through the shot attempt. Harrison, like, what are you expecting? Like, where do your expectations sit for LeBron and AD? Or do you think we're getting another one of these years where, LeBron kind of watches AD over the course of the year, and at the end of the year kind of goes, all right, I'll do this myself, right? Where he plays 47 minutes and 38 seconds in the last game of the year. I think for this team to really have a legit championship shot, AD is going to have to be, special AD, more consistently, I thought, than he was in last year's playoffs. Do you think he has that? Do you think this is finally the year that AD, steps into that role in this organization?
I do, and I do want to push back on the LeBron part of that a little bit, just because I think, to answer that part of the question, I think LeBron is always going to push that button
Yeah,
when his
yeah.
back is against the wall. Like that
Mhm.
that has been his entire basketball life. I think at some point it's not going to be there for him. I think we started to see some of that in the second half last year, where he just did not have his legs under him after just dominating the entire first half and playing basically every second. I think, except for, I think the 1 minute he sat was in the first half, right? If I'm remembering correctly, of that game, but it
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah. Mhm.
And so I think AD has that in him. I think we saw that during the bubble, the title year, frankly, that there were games where AD was the best player on the court, in my opinion.
Yep.
I was ready through, I think, 1 or 2 finals games to vote. I didn't have a vote, but my imaginary vote would have gone to him for finals MVP at that point. And then LeBron really stepped up and sort of pushed them over the finish line in that series. But just the way that AD can impact the game on both ends, we've seen how good he can be when he has some level of defensive support. We saw that during the title year. I think he has a little bit more of that this season than he did in the past. And, again, a lot of this is going to depend on health. I know that that's a cop out, but last year, he was fairly banged up by the end of that run. And I think that you could see some of that during his play. And if he can make it through and be reasonably healthy going into the playoffs, I totally believe that he can be the best player on a title team. It's just, that has been the exception rather than the rule. So I think there's some reason to doubt whether or not that is going to happen. But I think that if it does happen, yeah, I have no doubt that AD can be that guy.
AD is also in that role of being that guy. It's going to look different than it does as a lead ball handler type, right?
Yeah.
On some nights, like when he said, he wasn't special in the playoffs, I was like, he blocked more shots than anybody in the NBA in the last 12 years in the postseason this past
Anthony
year.
Oh,
just
I
doesn't
didn't say
value
I didn't say he wasn't special. I like
Casual.
there was some consistency stuff there, right?
On
Like,
offense in particular, right?
yeah.
Like, but
Mhm.
he's like, and that's the point that I'm making in terms of like, what does an Anthony Davis as the best player on a championship team look like? I think it starts on the defensive end and is
Mm.
being a guy that can, like, similar to Dwight on the old Orlando Magic teams, where it's like you got all this skill around him, and this dude is in charge of all of your stuff in the paint. Now, AD has a more diverse defensive type of presence, and he's not the mountainous human being that Dwight was in the same respect, right? But it's his dominance is going to start on the defensive end, and then on offense, keep going back to the 5-out point. He's the guy at the top of the key in the 5-out. He's literally in the middle of it, as opposed to last year. He was basically a roll guy. He was the guy with all the X's and Band-Aids on his forehead, Anthony, more than anybody. Because they said the whole point of like creating open shots from last year was like, AD, go run into shit. Okay, that's going to hopefully free up something for somebody, for you, preferably. But if not, it's going to open up something for somebody else. But nobody bore the brunt of like, everybody's going to be in the paint more than Anthony Davis. Now you're going to have him more on the perimeter in open space, attacking guys like Jokic, Valanciunas off of the dribble, which is where they're really vulnerable, as opposed to being the Rock that has to, bash their way down into the paint. And so I think the offense is more conducive to him having dominance on that end as well. And on the defensive end, like, he's pretty great, And so I think he can be that guy, between both ends of the floor, especially if he's got skill around him.
That Warriors series was just to bring it back to that, was some of the best defense I think I've ever seen anyone play.
He was in that Memphis series. He had Ja Morant taking 15-foot floaters. Like, this is the most, like,
distorting.
Screw it, I am going to jump as high as I possibly can and dunk on everybody kind of player that the league currently has. And he was like, yeah, that sucks in there.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, hey, AD, why aren't you giving us 35 also on it? It's like the guy that helps you move your couch. And you're like, he's like, hey, can I get some help moving your couch? And like, stop being so soft.
Hey, are you going to chip in on rent too? Can you?
Yeah.
Look, man, I will fully acknowledge that what AD is asked to do defensively is inordinate, right? And this year, I think it's going to be even more crazy because this team doesn't have like the perimeter defense that can stop some of these line drives, and some of that makes me a little nervous as well. But like when you look at like the all-time finals or playoff runs or whatever, they do tend to have some gaudy offensive stats as well as some of the stuff that you see defensively, not to the same extent with AD. But like, I don't know, there were some of those games that I thought offensively, like AD just like didn't show up, right? And I think every other game AD thing was always stupid. It was always overblown. But there were certainly games there where like, and like the Lake, I think some of this was health based too. I think AD looks a lot healthier this year. LeBron looks a lot healthier this year than the last time we saw them last year. And I thought that like the Lakers essentially had to follow a very specific script to win their series last year, right? It was steal the first away game, compete in the second one, but at the end of the day, you get your split, take care of the 2 games back at home, and then win hopefully in game 6, right? That's what I kept betting in all of in both of the series that they won. That was their only approach here, and I think part of that was because of some of the inconsistencies that we saw. I'm not saying this is the only reason. The teams that they were playing were really effing good too, but like I do kind of think some of the offensive inconsistencies were something that led to having to follow that script. And I want to see AD in his, it's his age 30 year, but he is still very much in his prime. I want to see like an MVP, and he has talked about this. He is welcoming it. I want to see an MVP type season from Anthony Davis this year. That'd be really cool to see. I want to see him kind of accept that challenge and be that guy for the entirety of a season. And I think he's more than capable of it. Like talent wise, he's the most capable of it on this roster. Is that too much to ask, or is that like, hey, you just move the couch? Can you also
can get some defensive player of the year votes this year?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I think they're going to give it to Jaren Jackson again. They're like, well, we can't ignore his 4 rebounds per game. It's just.
I think Jaren Jackson's going to get it again though, because they don't have Steven Adams this year, so like he's going to have to be that guy. But regardless,
did you watch Team USA?
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying it's going to end well.